So we are back here for our interview portion of the evening, and this is my special guest, Cheryl Dupuis, tonight. And the special thing about this, and what's kind of been a recurring pattern for this portion of the show, is that I've actually never met the person in person before we sat down and had an interview. And I think that is also sometimes the beauty of storytelling is using that curiosity to pull out somebody's story, to understand somebody's story that you haven't met before. So thank you for being here and allowing me to interview you as almost a complete stranger.
Well, you're welcome. This is going to be lots of fun.
So Cheryl is very used to being on the other side of things in a way, right?
Yeah, I do a lot of public speaking, so.
Mm-hmm. So I want you to take us back to that moment in your life where a sequence of events changed your life forever.
All right. That's going back a lot of years. This is back to the year 2000. I had 3 daughters and was married. And in 2000, I'm originally from Edmonton, born and raised there. I had gone back to visit my parents and my family. It was about a week before Thanksgiving. And I got a call one night, on a Sunday night, that my youngest daughter, who was 16 at the time, had been in a car accident. It was bad, and I was told to come home right away. I came back to Saskatoon with family, and my daughter, a couple days later, was pronounced brain dead. And we donated her organs, and she passed away. You want me to keep going with the events after that? And so I guess the public speaking kind of started shortly thereafter. It was weeks after. Our hairdresser at the time had a band here in the city, and she wrote a song, kind of a tune, about my daughter. The high school was having a hard time accepting the loss. There had been a number of deaths in the area. This is over in the Silverwood area. And there had been a number of deaths, and all the young people were really reeling from the loss of all these young people. There had been a suicide, several car accidents. My daughter, hers was a drunk driving accident. And we decided, Matt had contacted me and asked us to go to the school and do a program. And so that's kind of how my public speaking started. We did a program, we presented the song kind of as a memorial to my daughter. And it kind of snowballed after that. One school heard we were doing it, and it just kept going and going. And to this day, I'm still speaking in high schools about the dangers of drinking and driving.
So can you tell me about that first moment when you stood in front of a group of people to honor your daughter's life? How did that feel?
It was pretty scary. Growing up, I was a young person who didn't have a lot of inner confidence. I was really shy. I took piano. I could never do a recital. Or if at school I was asked to do a public presentation, that wasn't my thing. I liked to work in the background, not to be up on the stage in front of people. And a number of times I had tried over the years, and somehow it didn't work out. I knew that wasn't my gift, or thought it wasn't at that time. When I began speaking, all of a sudden things changed. It's like, this is what I was meant to do. And in a sense, it was therapy for me to start speaking of her death. It's not everybody's thing. I know for my husband at the time, it was not. It was difficult for him to have people come up to him and say, we heard your wife is speaking at the high school, and our kids came home. That was very difficult for my husband. For me, it became the beginning of a healing process, I think. As a mother, I think my biggest fear was that she'd be forgotten. She was so special to me, and I didn't want her to be forgotten. And to be able to talk about her in a safe place where it was okay to cry just started healing me, I believe. And as the years went by, and today, I don't we don't always understand why things happen the way they do, but I do know that that was her purpose. Her story was meant to be told, and I was meant to tell it for her.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I think it's such a interesting way of taking a really traumatic experience and turning it into such a beautiful gift. And how soon were you able to do something like that? Was it quite short after it had happened?
Yeah, I think she died in October of 2000, and then it was early in 2001 that I began speaking.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And how do you prepare yourself for something like that?
You know, I have to say, it wasn't, I mean, I guess I had strength that I didn't realize I had at the time, but I also had a group of friends that were so encouraging, and people would constantly come over and encourage me to start telling this story. You have to tell it, they'd say, you have to tell it. Mm-hmm. And I guess I just put one foot in front of the other. I mean, I guess when you're faced with that kind of tragedy, you have two choices. You can get out of bed or you can stay in bed. And I decided to put my foot over the side of the bed. Although, I mean, I had my days where I just wanted to pull the covers over my head and disappear. Mm-hmm. But getting out and talking about her and seeing the good it was bringing in the community and to other young people was the thing that kept me going. It was encouraging.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times when that happens in a school environment, there aren't always resources or opportunities to be able to know how to deal or cope with that, right? So I think what a beautiful opportunity for you to come in and help them through that, right? And how did you see that response change the way that you saw grief and the way that you defined it for yourself, being able to move through it that way?
I remember one time I was speaking and a teacher came to me after and she said, I didn't hear a story about a drunk driving accident. She said, I heard a love story. And it was a love story. Any parent, anybody who's had children imagines what that moment would be like when you get that call that your child is gone. And I took some time to think about that, a love story. And it was, because it didn't matter if it was a drunk driving accident. It didn't matter if it was a suicide. It didn't matter if it was a drug overdose or somebody struggling with drug addiction or an eating disorder. When you lose your child, it's all about the love. It doesn't matter why they died. They're not here anymore. And picking up the pieces and moving on is... It made me think when she said a love story that it was a story not just for the circumstances of my daughter's death, mm-hmm. but telling it also made a lot of young people, because I've had a lot of feedback over the years. I still get feedback from kids that heard me years ago and they're all grown up now. And I've had kids that have come to me after programs that said, I was contemplating suicide. I could never put my mom and dad through what you're going through. I've changed my mind. And that helped me move on, knowing there was a reason that this all happened. I don't like it. If I could change the circumstances and have her back, I would in an instant. But that's not going to be. And so accepting it and realizing the good that could come out of it has just made it has made my life fulfilling again and feel that void that I have from the loss of her.
Mm-hmm. And how are you able to navigate those experiences? Because I think what happens when we experience trauma like that, the people around us don't always know how to respond, because a lot of times there are no words to even explain, right? So, how did your outer world outside of you shift, and did you experience a lot of people, wanting to avoid asking you questions, or, that awkwardness that comes when we know that somebody has lost someone. How did you navigate that space?
Yeah, that's kind of a tough one because, friends and family know your history. People that don't know you, you meet someone on a plane, you're going somewhere, or just run into someone and you begin talking and they say, so, and how many children do you have? I, to this day, hesitate. Do I say 3? Because I know if they say, well, what do they do? I can talk about the first 2. And when I get to the 3rd, I say, she's not here anymore. It's like the showstopper. Some people are comfortable with it, but a lot of people right away don't know what to say. They kind of look up and, oh, gee, I'm sorry. And, it's okay. That was a lot of years ago, and we move on. And yet you deal with that own grief in your heart. To say I have 2, for me, particularly, feels like I'm not acknowledging that she was here and she was a light and she was a present and she was loved. And her life still is of value to me. And so, I think I just kind of navigate more by the feeling I get from talking, the vibes I'm getting from the person I'm talking to as to whether they want to talk about it or not. Mm-hmm. But I find that when I'm speaking to someone who's had a loss, I'm not terribly shy, I guess, about asking questions because I've been there and done that, and I know exactly what they're feeling.
Mm-hmm. What did you need to hear in those moments? When you were experiencing those things, I think that's probably something that a lot of us wonder when we're presented with that kind of situation and we feel awkward and we can't imagine, we don't know what to say back.
Yeah.
When you're going through that kind of loss, what do you need to hear from people?
I think, for me personally, it's different than somebody else, right? Everybody else has different needs. Like, I know my husband and I were sort of polar opposites. He didn't want to talk about it, and I did. I needed to see and feel and touch everything surrounding the accident so I could understand what happened. I had to see the car she was in. I had to interview everybody that touched her and dealt with her on the night of the accident. My husband, that was too much for him. Mm-hmm. But for me, the thing I appreciated most was when people allowed me to talk and to cry. Mm. And not everybody could understand maybe, but they certainly could empathize. And being allowed to feel the grief without feeling the guilt, because I've talked to a lot of people over the years who, when dealing with grief, are told, it's been long enough, get over it, move on. Mm-hmm. We all have a different cycle that we follow. Some hide it, some don't, some take longer, some are shorter. But it always leaves a scar. And so even today, every time I still tell the story and I go from beginning to end when I'm at a high school, I cry. It's fresh. It's like it was yesterday it happened. And I live through that nightmare again. And I always say it's kind of a sick way. I get excited when I'm going to a program because I get to visit her again. I get to spend some time with her again. I get to cry and it's okay. And then I can let her go again. Mm-hmm. And
were you ever worried that it might cause you even more grief reliving that over and over again?
Yeah. I wasn't concerned personally for myself. Mm-hmm. Others were concerned for me. I had actually medical. My doctor said I shouldn't be doing it. He said it's killing you, but he said that 10 years ago.
Still here?
I'm still here. So whether I'm a cat with 9 lives, I'm not sure. But but no, for me, it was healing. And because you think about it every day. I mean, anybody that's lost someone, that especially when it's a tragedy through illness or an accident or something, someone that's died young, you're going to think about it every day for the rest of your life. I mean, it's been 19 years for me now, and I still think about it every day, many times a day. Mm-hmm. Not with grief and sadness that I'm tearing my clothes, but but it's there. And you just remembering her and being able to do it, it fuels me. It gives me energy. And hearing, again, the people that come to me later and tell me the difference it made in their life has just kept me motivated. And there's a purpose.
How has living through those kind of experiences and being so closely knit with the feeling of grief changed who you are?
I think I call myself a survivor now. I wouldn't have before. Like it seems like bad things happen in three, they say, and I lost my health due to a medical issue a few years after Danae passed away, and then my husband passed away from cancer. People look at me and say, how do you do it? How can you talk about it? I couldn't do it. Well, I guess none of us chooses the adversity that comes into our life. And you're amazed at yourself, at the strength that you have when you need it the most. Having a supportive family, having good friends, has certainly kept me balanced and have kept me going. And how has it changed me as a person? I mean, I'm not the same person I was before all this happened, but I'm a deeper person. I think deeper. It's like when you were talking in the beginning, how you just saw something and it changed the way you thought about things. I so much more appreciate health and watching my other children and my grandchildren grow, and the health and the safety that they have just makes me appreciate life so much more.
I think in a really interesting way, like grief gives us gratitude.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And I think that through this whole experience, it probably fills you with so much gratitude to be able to share her story and to continue honoring her life in the way that you do, right?
Absolutely. I am so grateful. I'm grateful to the many kids that I've spoken to that have touched my life over the years, and made me feel like I was doing something worthwhile, and being able to honor her, and just the honor that other people have given her by wanting to know her story. And it does make me really, really grateful. Grateful that I was able to get out of bed and, like I said, put my foot on the floor and start functioning again.
And I think, the one other thing that comes to mind when you say this too is, what if kids taught you about grief? Because I think that the way that you've taken this story and who you've chosen to share it with and educate with is so needed in the world. Because I think that at every single walk in our lives, we can experience something like that. So what kind of profound moments or realizations have you had from sharing this with kids and just watching them change and grow and beginning to understand what that actually means?
Often after my program, when I'm done speaking, we sort of have display tables at the back, and the kids come and they're told that they can come and talk and ask questions, and that there's no question they can't ask. And I've had a lot of kids over the years open up, and which just always amazes me, because I know, even when I'm speaking, to see a grade 12 boy begin to cry, it's hard to hit those emotions with young people nowadays. They see everything on TV and they've experienced so much. And when they come to me after and open up, like I said, I've had at least 15, 20 kids that have come to me after saying, we were contemplating suicide. I've had others. One night in the middle of the night at 3:00 in the morning, we got a phone call at home. Some young person was in a bar and they'd had too much to drink, and they just wanted to phone and tell us that as they were getting in their car, they saw our keychain and said, I'm going to call my mom to pick me up, and they wanted us to celebrate with them. So, the rewards have been just incredible, and the changes a lot of kids have made about thinking about their safety. It's not often presented to them from a mother or a parent's perspective. What would happen to their parents if something happened to them? Mm-hmm. And so much of the reward has been knowing that we've probably prevented some premature accidents and deaths. And there's some families that will never have to go through what we've had to live through. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that is just so rewarding.
Mm-hmm. And I think the underlying thing of all of this, too, is drinking and driving, right? Like, I think, what a beautiful opportunity for you to be able to advocate for something as well. And, in doing that work over the years that you've been doing, has there been a shift, or have we moved forward, or have we moved backwards when it comes to getting in our cars and drinking and driving?
Well, I think if you look at the statistics, it says that we're not really making a lot of progress. Mm-hmm. But then again, we have a higher population, and we're adding new things to the list, such as texting and distracted driving, and now marijuana, and all these number of things that make, possibly put kids at risk. Mm-hmm. So, but I think it is needed, and I think just telling a story, interesting. You call this storytellers, but just going and being honest with the kids and sharing a story. When you just speak from the heart, the kids get that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And they open up and they really start thinking, because I think a lot of kids are making better decisions, and there are more options for them getting home safe. Because mm-hmm. most kids do get home safe, but it's the odd one, and unfortunately my daughter was one of those mm-hmm. that didn't make it home. Mm-hmm.
And what can you offer for, anyone? I mean, even anyone in the room tonight that's maybe gone through a loss at, whether it was expected and it was long and slow, or it was tragic and it was fast. What can you offer in terms of your experience with grief? What advice would you have so that others can, move through it themselves?
I would say don't isolate yourself, because you want to be alone. You kind of want to be in your bed with covers over your head, or mm-hmm. not go out much, and talk about it. Like, allow the people in your life that love you, let them love you, and talk about it. And don't be afraid to cry, mm-hmm. and don't let anybody rush you into getting over your grief. We all have our different limits and time periods, and you have to be true to yourself in that sense. Because I think a lot of people expect that you should quit talking about it. And I've had the odd comment over the years, like, my memories are my memories, my past is my past. And when speaking of something in the past that happened to include my daughter, I'm not going to omit that, because it, some people feel that's delving in grief, but it isn't. It's just a memory. You're talking about, a Christmas back in whatever, and you had 3 children at that time, and it's not mm-hmm. a sad thing, but mm-hmm. She was there. So, mm-hmm. Be true to yourself, and talk, and let people take care of you and baby you a bit. I needed that a lot, mm-hmm. and I'm so grateful for the many people that were in my life that did do that for me, and allowed me to speak about it mm-hmm. and grieve it at my rate. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And there's a really popular TED Talk that's going around right now about grief, and you and I briefly had a conversation about it before, and it is that we don't move on from grief, we move forward with it. And yes. I think that it's, her life story is very similar to yours, in the sense of the losses at the rate in which they'd happened in a very short period of time. And, can you speak on that a little bit, of how helping people shift that perspective and understanding that you don't necessarily, you don't have to move on the way that other people tell us that we should sometimes,
But I think being able to move forward through it, like you have been speaking for years and reliving that story to be able to create change in the world, right?
Yeah.
So I would love for you to speak on that powerful piece of not moving on from grief, but moving forward with it.
I think the moving forward, as I continued to speak, I moved more forward. As I said, it was sort of, for me, a type of therapy. It helped with my healing. And the more I did it, the more power I felt. In the beginning, I felt so helpless and defeated, and it felt like life was over. But if you allow those feelings, if you dwell on the feelings that are negative all the time, I found that they stay there and they start taking precedence. As I tried to think of more positive things, there were a lot of positive things, even that came out of her death. She donated her organs, and there was a 16-year-old girl, the same age as her, that received her liver. There was a mother who had a couple sons, and she got the heart. And so there were a lot of lives. There were two people whose lives were saved with kidneys. And years later, long after that was all over, and I wasn't thinking about that anymore, I walked into a bank one day, and somebody said, "You're Danae's mom?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "We're wondering if you'd like to talk to this lady." And I was brought into an office, and here I met the woman that had received her heart. And it was quite an experience. As she told me how she's been able to see her children graduate high school and go to college or university and carry on with their lives. And, there was a deep appreciation, although that doesn't negate my loss, but there was a deep appreciation that something so beautiful was allowed to come from something so tragic. And it was just, again, by just keep moving forward and, just keep moving forward.
I think that's a beautiful place to end off.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here and sharing tonight.
You're welcome.